Welcome everyone to the Norton Gaming Community Showcase number 3 or 4 at this point. We've done quite a few with partners Norton Gaming. So as always, starting off with a big shout out to them for everything that they do, especially with ESL and Starcraft 2. But I am ZombieGrub, and once again I am with Cats, and today we're going to be looking over some community replays and then doing a kind of mini talk show talking about the recent balance patch, Katowice, as well as the Casters Civil War later down the road. But first and foremost, Cats, we're going to get into some replays, and we already have one loaded up and ready to go. So I guess it's been a while, Cats. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you. In the rehearsal, you were like, Cats, how are you doing? And here you didn't ask me how I was doing. I was like, Jess, are you going to ask me how I'm doing? I'm doing fantastic.
Nice. I plan on fitting in there. Rehearsal, guys, we just literally are just like, and then this, and then this, and then this. Okay, we're done. That's rehearsals.
Yeah.
But, you know, obviously we're excited to be here talking about StarCraft 2, and I know that there's a couple of pretty fun submissions in the replays this time around, as there was last time too. So thank you everyone who actually submitted the replays over to the Norton Gaming Showcase. I think we're ready to go, and I think we can just actually jump right into it. For those of you who are here right from the start, you guys can already type in chat key for me. We do have a giveaway going on, so feel free to do that, and I'll remind you guys throughout the show as well. But I'm just gonna press the go button and hope that everything works, because I think that's actually the plan here. We got a replay from wtih, and I think it's gonna have a pretty funny build order in it, Cats.
All right. So wtih, this looks like a platinum border for both of these players, right? That's a platinum border?
Yeah, I think it was.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. All right. On the bottom right, we are spawning here on top of the red Terran, wtih.
Hells yeah. And on the top left-hand side, it's... Oh, okay. Heineken. Heineken?
I'm guessing they're going with Heineken without the trademark, you know, problem.
Yeah. That must be it.
That must be it, yeah. Anywho, so Berlingrad, wtih has actually been doing a couple of fun proxies lately, and this is labeled Planetary TVP. So I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen in this game, but I know that they've been experimenting with a few fun things. Oh, well, we know what the Protoss is going to do. Good old-fashioned cannon rush.
Classic. So there's already a forge on the way, and he's going to be moving in with his probe. Let's see, our observer is actually a expert cannon rusher, so this is already a bad pylon, I think. Not the camera, if that's true. Or is, yeah.
Not the camera.
Yeah. So not the greatest start, yeah.
Yeah, the camera not as effective. The cannon rush so far very ineffective. This doesn't really make a lot of sense. And honestly, if I was wtih and I just saw the pylons, I'd be confused. I'd be like, is this a fake? But he does have an SCV scouting the forge. Now we actually have cannons going down. But even if these cannons got up, Cats, I mean, what are they really going to do here?
Yeah, very interesting choice here to go after the pylons, seeing as they have more HP. One is completed and there's 3 of them. But now he will go after the cannon instead, I would guess. Only 3 SCVs at a time would kill those cannons, so this is definitely a little bit of an overcommitment from wtih, whose plan really is on the other side of the map by the looks of it. Oh, this Marine is getting in a little bit of trouble. This cannon is doing fantastic for itself. It poses no threat to the Terran either, because there's no vision of the high ground either, so...
Right.
Yeah, he's gonna be fine, wtih.
Yeah, I think we can kind of, we see something, we just kind of put our horse blinders on and just focus in on it. But really, if you think about what this cannon rush is doing, it's basically nothing.
Well,
so unfortunately,
it's something, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, wtih isn't really, acknowledging that. Just a couple of Marines, or even just one Marine on the high ground, on a hold position, would do the trick as far as stopping this from actually doing damage. But missing the opportunity, what wtih is not missing, is an opportunity to proxy a command center. And Heineken just not going to even respond.
Yeah, this one could be dealt with one probe attacking the SCV, seeing as it is in range of vision. And wtih can't really get units across the map. Here comes the probe, so now this is puzzling. Oh, here comes all the probes!
Oh my god.
Oh,
wait,
never mind.
what?
Oh, okay.
What?
Well, no probes are being pulled. And I thought I was about to scratch my head as to how wtih could possibly get this planetary fortress finished, seeing as the replay is labeled planetary fortress.
Yeah.
And this
Yeah,
is how, yeah, the Protoss did not attack it. So.
I'm very confused what the Protoss was actually trying to do there. It looked like they were only intending to build a gateway, and Box selected their probe to do that, because they definitely didn't go any farther. Finally, the, like, what was that? The scouting probe comes back and stops the command center. Oh, it's a bit awkward.
Massive light bulb lighting up on top of Hinniken's head, and now that's, I mean, that should be enough to stop this planetary fortress, unless the probe stops attacking the SCV.
Oh,
so,
no!
For those of you at home, whenever this happens and there's an SCV building something, what you want to do is shift-click multiple times onto the SCV so the probe will stay tagged onto it and you don't have to worry about it. But, hey, the CC is going to finish, and now it's going to turn into a planetary fortress, so now things definitely get complicated here for Heineken.
They definitely do. Amazing tidbit there by wtih, actually. Yeah, it's such a problem when it comes to probe harassment, but this should just never in 1,000 years actually have gotten up into a planetary. By the way, it's going to have armor. Building armor has been finished, so not only does that increase the actual building armor, but it also increases the carrying capacity of a planetary, or well, the command center on I guess default, but not that it really matters here. No SCVs to repair it. Does it beat 2 cannons? Yeah, it does. 4 cannons might have been a bit of a struggle, and there are 2 more on the way, but a mule gets dropped to go for their repair. That's exactly what we need to do, and those probes can't do anything about it.
Yeah, and now it's starting to look impossible for Heineken, who is floating a little bit of I guess he could potentially hold a second command center, however. And this is just nasty.
What?
Trap could not deal with this.
Yeah, well, no, Trap would not deal with this. Imagine, I mean, Trap would have pulled probes. Let's be honest about that. But imagine if just somehow, some way, a planetary fortress gets up in Trap base, and even he would have trouble against it. And unfortunately, the options are limited for Heineken's defense. And I think they're starting to realize that. I don't know if this Nexus is about to be just one of those, like, evacuation Nexus. Like, I guess I give up my main base, right? Or what, but kind of harkening back to the beginning of this replay, wtih, in the same fashion that the cannon rush didn't actually hit anything terribly important, the planetary doesn't hit everything important. Like, Heineken could actually just start rebuilding elsewhere in his own main base still, because planetaries can't move.
Yeah, and it's actually quite clever of him to make a Stargate here, because there's no anti-air, right? Like, the planetary fortress will not shoot up. But maybe this factory will have an answer for that. We'll need something like cyclones coming out of it. So we'll see if there is a tech lab being added to the factory. And there is.
Okay. Good call. Second command center, which I'm going to assume also turns into a planetary, should probably get as close as possible to the actual Nexus. Well, high-sec auto-tracking is also finished, so I guess it doesn't have to be as close as usual.
There we go.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. So that's definitely going to kill the Nexus eventually. You won't reach back towards that Stargate, but you will be able to build up a decent number of Void Rays. But we are in the new patch, guys. Kind of funny to bring this into the fold, but yeah, new patch. Takes longer to build Void Rays, and they're slightly more expensive.
Yeah, so that bank is definitely going to come in handy for that reason, as he could definitely afford a few Void Rays. To say the least, and now double Cyclone production, as well as a Widow Mine from the secondary factory here on the side of, how do you pronounce his name again? Sithawk?
I go with wtih.
wtih, I like that.
Yeah. I think it's a very American approach to pronunciation.
wtih.
So say all the letters.
wtih.
Yeah.
Wait, you're skipping the H, no?
That's the sound that TH makes.
Oh, yeah. You're right, yeah.
Yeah, but I imagine in other languages, yeah, you would like, you know, Zwitha something or Zithak, and you would just skip the W completely. Anywho, one Void Ray actually falls. The Widow Mine is effective. The Cyclone should stay alive. And definitely take down that Void Ray later.
Yeah, lots of SCVs surrounding it, so it could be repaired, but the Void Ray is not gonna have the shelter of any shield batteries whatsoever, and so it's gonna fall also. And this looks very good for wtih.
It does. think with the factory production, that's the real kill maneuver here. The planetaries can only ever do so much, especially if it was only the one planetary. But the second one actually killing the Nexus and then the Cyclones, they're going to be the ones that actually can run around and kill all these units. Case in point, another Void Ray goes down, and there's no production. Pretty sure that our poor Protoss player is just frazzled at this point. They just, you know, they're so confounded that this happens that they're not really doing anything. They're just sitting there in silence.
Reinforcements, though. This should do it, CG.
Yeah. Yeah, because, well, Heineken's going to lose this game with almost 2,000 minerals and 400 gas as they just stopped even producing from their own Stargates. They missed the Stargate production on the second one they finally built up. I mean, I'm not saying that 6 Void Rays would have actually won the game, but they would have gotten closer to it.
For sure, and the cannon does contribute finally. That cannon in the mineral line there does kill a Marine, I believe, or an SCV or something of the sorts. Now this Void Ray is gonna, a very brave Void Ray, actually going into everything, will get a Cyclone for his troubles, but ends up falling, and yeah, options for Heineken are definitely running thin here.
Certainly are. No Nexus, 0 workers. That is officially a game of StarCraft over, actually. I think Heineken might be just playing a little bit stubborn. One more Void Ray will pop out, the other one destined to die in queue. There's no supply for it. And actually, that's the other one. Yeah, that's a good question.
No GG.
Nope, none at all. Well done, wtih. Continuing to improve and develop the planetary response to Protoss, by the way. It started with a simple planetary at the front of the Protoss's base, and I said, you know, if you proxied a couple extra buildings, that would probably work more often. And he did that. And then this whole as a response to a cannon rush, that's new to me. So is wtih continuing to develop his own little meta.
For sure. I feel like one thing that he could have done better, for sure, is maybe build the CC out of Vision and then float it into Vision, right? Like, I think that would be a very big detail because, I mean, yeah, you should really definitely expect a worker to be pulled at least to deal with the SCV.
He might have thought, just with how fast he was going, trying to defend the cannon rush and build the command center, he might have, like, miscalculated how much the command center was seeing. It's so easy to do, right? Just kind of slap it down anywhere. That's still my goal. Oh, actually, that was quite close to the cannon, that was quite close to the gateway. Whoops-a-daisy. And then you just get fortunate when they don't pull any probes towards it.
For sure. For sure. But yeah, wtih will take that one swiftly. And do we have another replay?
We do indeed. We've got quite a few, thanks to you guys submitting. So next up we have Covey, who we did actually cast last time we did this. I believe a Masters level ZVP, if I remember correctly. And we do have another ZVP submitted by them.
Nice. Covey was the submitter?
Indeed, yes.
Perfect. And Captain Newbie, this is a ladder game, I assume? So Masters level ladder?
Yes, yeah.
Very cool.
Yep. There have actually been a couple people submitting, custom games, which I'm actually really excited to see, just because I definitely grew up in a, I don't know, the era when 1v1 OBS was super popular, and especially since I grew up with ladder anxiety, I pretty much only ever played 1v1 OBS, which is an arcade map, but you just play a bunch of people who join the lobby. And then I also played a lot of customs against friends. And I feel like I just don't hear about that as much anymore, you know? So the fact that a couple of people actually are finding communities and actually custom gaming against each other, it's kind of nicer than just the I guess the ladder experience, which can sometimes be lonely, but also oftentimes rewarding, especially when you beat someone who's BM, which I think a lot of people like about it.
For sure. I definitely, in Brood War, we used to do a lot more customs than in StarCraft 2. When StarCraft 2 came out, though, I guess we did a lot of customs, like when we were starting teams and friend groups and stuff like that, like, you know, like to prepare for other teams and friend groups and whatnot. But not a thing that occurs as much these days, for sure.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have back-to-back cannon rushes. Of course, different matchups, different leagues here, but nonetheless, Covey is going to be dealing with a cannon rush, which they see totally And it, like, as soon as it got slapped down, that Overlord just stayed there. So there's no misgivings here. There's no unfortunate, like, lack of scouting if the Overlord to continue moving on. It's a cannon rush, and now Covey needs to mentally prepare for how they're going to deal with it, because they're not going to deal with it by actually killing these cannons.
For sure. Yeah, these cannons were unkillable once the pylons went down. We see the first pylon of this cannon rush was much better than the last game, as it makes it so that there can be a 3-pylon wall-off. At the same time, it's a little bit susceptible to spines from the high ground or queens from the high ground, so I like that Captain Noob is also dropping that pylon on the high ground there for vision. And I think Covey has to cancel this hatchery. He has already taken one of his gases. I would love for him to take a second gas if his response is going to be Ravagers. And at this point, you have to imagine that it's one of the better options he has.
Yeah, I think so, but okay, yeah, now taking the second gas. So a spine crawler is being built. I'm going to take out that high ground pylon, which is currently giving that high ground vision, and then move on to eventually killing all these cannons. But it will be quite a slow process for Covey. So it'd be a lot nicer if Covey could somehow actually get this second base up. And it does... It looks like Captain Newbie is thinking about... yeah, I was going to say cannon rushing that as well, and there it goes.
Yeah, and this is very good by Captain Newbie. Again, I mean, Covey should be trapped in his base for a little while, so it would be very difficult to help that base. Covey did make 4 circlings, which are mostly going to be useful or useless for the time being, but maybe if they can find a way out to that pylon at his now natural base, they could be good. And this is the spine that I was talking about, right? It's really good on the high ground, because now that the high ground vision has been cleared, he can just move it and kill all the cannons with it. At the same time, he is mining just with 3 on gas, not opting to take the second gas or saturate the second gas or make a Roach Warren. So things are definitely getting complicated here for Covey.
Right. I do wonder if that's going to end up being a mistake. You know, with already a couple of roaches out, you're busting down these cannons a little bit faster, and then hopefully busting them fast enough to actually get the roaches over to the new hatchery, which... again, might have had a, you know, certainly better shot at taking care of these cannons than these slow lings are going to have. But the looks of things, with 2 cannons and a shield battery, that's just going to be too much defense for Covey to save this second hatchery. So a third hatchery goes down, which I believe Captain Newbie was figuring out at the very least. There was a probe over there blocking the drone, but it was just unsuccessful ultimately. But Captain Newbie, not going to be able to deny that one. And no Nexus as of yet, still working on that Stargate.
Yeah, that is definitely something to note here on Captain Newbie's side. If he wants to improve his build order a little bit, dropping that Nexus earlier would have been huge, right? Because there's really little to no threat on the side of Covey, so if he could keep tabs on what Covey is or can do, then he could have easily delayed a little bit of his tech. Maybe the cannon, right? Like the cannon is kind of mostly useless unless there are circlings produced from that third base, I guess. So I don't know, maybe it was fine. I'd have to really take a deeper look at it, but this Nexus does feel extremely late.
Right. I can understand. Put yourselves in the Protoss' shoes a little bit if you want to. You know, I know some of you really don't want to be known as cheesers, but you know, you don't have maybe all that much information. You're worried about your lack of information. You know, you killed a hatchery. You know that they were maybe planning on taking a third one, but you're not 100% positive about that. You didn't get back into the main base to see if there in fact was 6 roaches waiting, Ravagers even, waiting to walk across the map unscouted once the cannons died. So, you know, trying to get to that Stargate, which is really going to be your end, like, stop any form of aggression type of structure here, is a lot more appealing than trying to thread the needle between the cannon rush and the actual expansion process. Unfortunately, you know, that just means that Captain Newbie, yeah, he's totally safe right now, isn't actually all that far ahead on the economy.
Yeah, in fact, he might be a little bit behind, which seems weird because both of his attempts were successful, wildly successful, I would say. So, so yeah, I mean, and Covey is situated now on 3 base. He has a couple of spores going around, a bunch of queens as well for the Void Rays. The first Void Ray didn't kill the Overlord here on the high ground. The second one might see it here with this rally, so maybe turns around for it. And yeah, also +1 attack on the ground being researched for Captain Newbie, as well as charge. But he really has no gateways to use with that for the time being.
It looks like just in general, the follow-up from the cannon rush is where Captain Newbie gets a little lost. So clearly knows the trick to the cannon rush on this map especially, so that's probably actually gets up and running 9 times out of 10. But actually the follow-up, not really cohesive here. Whereas Covey is doing very much more the expected Zerg thing. Yeah, the response, the lack of roach response might have been a bit surprising, and currently in a little supply block as well, but 3 base, droning, now getting a Roach Warren, probably going to resaturate the gases soon. Like, that's just typical Zerg stuff that nets them that economic victory, and there's really no worry for them to even start making Roaches anyways, because they can see, like, Twilight Council still researching, no armies really being formed in the natural. I mean, they might be a little surprised, because there's no scout in the main base. If Gateway's war finishing, if that was charged finishing up and a war prism they had not scouted, that would be concerning, but we know that's not the case. Covey is making Roaches too right now, so everything lines up for Covey. It doesn't really line up for Captain Newbie.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's important to point out because these are Masters players, and ultimately we want them to take something from this, right? Assuming that they get a look at this, maybe there's some advice that they could take. So for example, like there's inconsistencies on the side of Captain Nui, chrono boosting his charge when he doesn't have a single zealot, right? Might have been better to chrono boost probes instead earlier, or chrono boost void rays to try and make something happen with them. But yeah, like you were saying, it's there where Captain Nui seems to get a little bit jammed after the cannon rush. And on the side of Covey, the third hatchery was, I think, good once the contain was busted. But before that, the second hatchery was a little bit ambitious because it could have always gotten cannon rushed, which it did because he had no access to it. He couldn't get any units out of his base to help it. So maybe proxying that somewhere else, a little bit more secretive, or at least having an overlord so that you can cancel the hatchery if it gets cannon rushed, would be adjustments that he could make.
Yeah, the Overlord came back a little after the fact the hatchery was done, so you're right. Could have at least gotten the cancel there. We do have a bit of an awkward engagement, not necessarily because of those charge lots, right, which are coming in from a proxy gateway, which is kind of cute. Oh, the Roaches were plentiful enough. It's the Void Rays that were being added in that made this potentially awkward, but we're talking about Queens on creep, so they are allowed to transfuse each other, and for Covey, good news is they made a decent number of Queens. They didn't over-invest into a bunch of creep tumors for really no good reason. They had plenty of transfuse to work with, and as long as the Queens don't die to the charge lots, which is currently happening, 2 of them go down, then the Queens and a couple of Spore Crawlers should take care of the Void Rays, and the Roaches take care of the charge lots.
Yeah, the Void Rays, they're head bumping into a Spore for a second as well, didn't help their DPS against the Queens, and that is really the balance that Captain Nui is going to be looking to break, because otherwise on the ground you're going to really struggle to make enough zealots to really deal with this many Roach Ravagers. So Captain Nui would be wise to expand yesterday, and he's finally moving a probe there, but there's a circling well positioned by Covey that is very good anticipating and knowing that his opponent needs to take a third in order to try to win. I like that there is DTs out there, but unlikely that they find much. I like this. I like the rallying here towards the Spore. Very well done.
Good point. I mean, that's actually the best case scenario for the Dark Templars, who clearly, if they'd walk into the natural, there is a Spore Crawler. Captain Newbie knew that, so at least trying to play kind of carefully with the DTs. They are still a big investment, and they might not get exactly what they're looking for, but this one DT at the very least, hacking away at the Roaches. The Void Rays have been pushed off. The Gateway has been destroyed, but those DTs, they didn't kill many of the drones. Looks like Covey responded really quickly on the pull, but they are going to get the hatchery.
Yeah, and that's big. Another DT gets warped in and can kill a lot of these Queens potentially, as there is low transfuse, and now they're gonna go and waddle onto the creep where they can actually transfuse each other. Here comes the rest of the DT, so that's really good. Overseer already available though, so this game turns a little bit more hectic even. Captain Newbie could really use some more gases at his natural expansion, as his main is already oversaturated, and then maybe look for something different, as he is taking a third himself.
Again, it feels like Captain Newbie's problem here is just the follow-up ideas are fairly good, right? So you can't rush into a Void Ray charge attack. That actually sounds like it could be really devastating to a lot of Zergs who have handled the cannon rush very poorly or just ill-prepared, right? I could see it working, but it wasn't particularly fast. So Covey actually was, even maybe without really knowing what it was going to be, was defending it. And then the follow-up here is also coming out really late. So while the DTs did that, like that damage that says, okay, maybe I can stay in this game. What's lacking is the macro behind it, right? So if the DTs did that damage and they bought that time and they made Covey afraid of moving out, and Captain Newbie had a third finish with Immortals pumping or Colossus getting into Blink Stalkers, Storm, something like that, then we'd be talking about a very playable game. But right now for Captain Newbie, there's a couple of options for Covey and not so many options for Captain Newbie.
For sure. And right now, I guess on the side of Captain Newbie, you'd be scared of something like a Nidus. And that is the only reason that I can see him making units here like Archons and those Zealots defensively. I like the row of 8 here. I think that Disruptors are probably going to be the best answer that he could have gotten for Roaches. But like you're saying, it's a very late response. So it's a good idea, but the execution, it comes a little bit late, right? And it's not a mechanical gating here. It's just he's having these thoughts a little bit slow, because it is a very chaotic, a very difficult situation to prepare for. And all that said, beautiful decision making here on the side of Covey. He goes straight for the Muta. Those are units that are going to be able to punish his opponent on the other side of the map without the need for the Nidus or anything like that, or like a ferry of some sort with Overlords to bring the Queens over to where they can deal with the one Void Ray. So Muta are a great idea, and he's just banking up a few of them, and he's going to cross the map and no doubt do a lot of damage.
Hallucination is a very good idea, but it's coming in too late and it gets destroyed. So the latest possible scout on the Mutas, and even if they were scouted, I don't know if Captain Newbie could have actually responded. Not a whole lot of bank, no sack defense really in the bases, so you'd be choosing between sack defense or Stalker Warpins, and neither one would probably be enough. Talking about 13 Mutas, it's not a crazy high number, but it's certainly a good number to start that distraction, get that damage, and then Covey invest the rest of the supply into a big old Roach Baneling attack.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, 13 Muta all at once can be a massive surprise. It is not a devastating army in itself, but as far as killing probes, they're going to do the job just fine. And I do like, again, that Captain Newbie was going for a fourth, but again, it's a little bit too late. And now it looks like it's just going to be lights out for him, as his opponent has more than twice the supply, and he is completely maxed.
Covey did have to dodge out of a Disruptor shot, but successfully did so. This time around, a little less successful of a dodge, but these Disruptors have a lot more work to do. They'd have to kill pretty much the entire army. And even if they did that, Covey's got another one in his back pocket. Plenty of banks, 74 drones, 4 bases, playing out the final moment of this game pretty darn well. Pretty pro, actually. The Mutas harassing, the big attack on the right side was missing centrifugal hooks, so that's the only thing there, but doesn't actually need to win the game.
Indeed. So here comes what we expect to be one of the last Disruptor shots, as all the army of Covey is going to collapse onto what's left of Captain Newbie, who does GG and exits the game.
GG, well played. So again, you know, your points bringing up some tips for these players, but for Covey, you know, that natural hatchery, the second hatchery, I should say, little bit bold when you still haven't really handled the cannon rush. You know, you're going to take a while with a single spine crawler, and for the Protoss player, I would suggest personally, in line with what you were discussing, but just actually getting a follow-up build order. Because it basically felt like they had a good idea, and it's great to have a good idea, but when you start to reach up into Masters and you want to actually increase, get the Masters 2, 1, whatever, you actually have to be, you know, getting an appropriate build order, which is just lining things up in the best possible manner. Because I know that build order phrase intimidates some people, but that's going to get you that faster follow-up attack and probably be really devastating to Zergs.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot about experience. This is a chaotic type of playstyle, so it's very difficult to try and have a very well set build order. Like a lot of Terrans, for example, can have a build order that is exactly the same up until the moment they hit, because they can be proactive with it and they can hit first. But with this type of build, with a cannon rush, a lot of the time you can't have the same build order, because you don't know how much you're going to be investing and how your opponent is going to defend. And it varies from map to map, like how many pylons you're going to need, whether the opportunity to cannon rush the next base or not is going to present itself, and how much you're going to invest into that and such. But like you said, it's just an issue of being consistent with what you're trying to do. So in this case, for example, if you're going for charge, then you need to have the setup, right? Like just have a lot of gateways and be ready for it, or do something else in between. to give yourself the time, and that just comes with experience, I think. But yeah, a lot of good ideas there from Captain Newbie, so definitely a lot to improve on.
Yep. And we have another replay getting set
Hypers.
up here. We have Terran player Mike submitting this replay.
Oh, I know Mike.
Platinum, I believe. You do? Mike Sixers?
Oh no, a different Mike.
Oh, okay, different Mike. I'll get you in here.
It says entering lobby. I bugged it. I think I might have to relog.
Ah, yes. Yes, there is a infamous bug among people who actually play replays anyways, which is that if you try and join instead of being invited, StarCraft 2 doesn't like it. Says you're rude and boots you out of the game.
Yeah. Does it always happen? How often does it happen?
I would say pretty much every time.
Oh, really? Well,
yeah, I don't cast all that many replays with other people, but I think the first time I experienced it was like Fear Dragon I tried joining off of Fear Dragon like 3 years ago. And every time I've ever tried joining off of people, it's failed. So it's been a while.
No bueno. Let me get our observer in here. Wait. Okay, it worked.
And we can get going.
Oh, these guys are customing, huh? Because they're teammates.
I think so. Yeah, and they're not the red-blue color. So
True.
we were discussing that earlier.
Hells yeah. So it's gonna be Mike versus Pan Mim. And do you know what the level of these players is by chance?
Platinum, I believe, or Diamond 3.
I am the rank roulette champion, so I could have guessed, but
Yeah. You could have guessed off of zero information, just how they're spawned.
yeah.
I would have believed in you.
All right. So all I learned from that is that it's never silver. In the top right-hand side, it's Mike.
In the bottom left, you have the teal Zerg, Panmim.
Pan Mim. It sounds delicious.
Are you thinking bread because of pan?
A little bit. I was thinking bread because of oh no. I don't know why I was thinking bread. I was thinking those Mim Pao, you know, the Chinese bread buns.
Oh, sure.
But I think it's more because of the Mim than the pan. But
Oh, that's
yeah,
so weird.
That would yeah.
I was going with the pan.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Double bread.
anyways. Actually, the first thing that I was thinking, I wasn't even food. I was thinking of Pan Am, which
What's Pan Am?
is an airplane company in the 60s. It was like the most popular airplane company. It was when airplanes were like, the new big deal, and it was, the thing of the future, and pilots were considered superstars. And I think they lasted up until the 90s. But the only reason that I know this is not because I personally have flown on Pan Am a lot or anything like that. It's because of two movies, right? One, Catch Me If You Can. It was all about, was a lot about flying because he impersonated a pilot for Pan Am. And then the second movie is Hook, where I believe they were flying on Pan Am when they went to London. So I was like, so it's at least between like the 50s and the 90s, and then they closed out because I guess they got beat out by the competition.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I watched Catch Me If You Can, but I don't remember it that much. It's with Leo DiCaprio, right?
Yeah, and Tom Hanks. Quite a good movie. Entirely false.
Oh, I see.
Which is quite funny.
And Hook, isn't that the Peter Pan guy?
Yeah, exactly. Robin Williams playing Peter Pan grown up.
Oh, I see. And they fly in Peter Pan, like on airplanes?
Yeah, so the joke is that, so he forgets he's Peter Pan, right?
Oh,
but
cool.
then he, learns throughout the movie that he's Peter Pan, but he's afraid of heights. So he forgot he was Peter Pan, he grew up, and he became afraid of heights, so they're flying, and he's actually terrified of flying.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I wouldn't have watched that one because it has Robin Williams in it.
Yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh, actually, we shan't discuss this again. I'll make people rot up in chat. Both good movies, I guess, in their own right, but most people consider Catch Me If You Can. I think it was an Oscar contender, and all that good stuff. So perhaps the better movie. But you know what we got? We actually have Ling Banebust versus a 1-base Terran. And,
Yeah.
well, Mike should get the better side of this.
It's been spotted, and there is Hellions in production, so Mike should get the better side of this for sure. There is a Wolof, there is Hellions already, but easier said than done, right? As long as the Hellions can actually kite back the Ling Bane and kind of like do their jobs, then this should be good for Mike, like you're saying. But if they get surrounded, then it can still be lights out, because this is a massive attack on the side of Panem.
Panmum. Yeah, it's something that Mike is technically scouted, so should be a little more prepared for, but actually the Hellions currently getting surrounded, just basically the fact that they were 2 sets of 2 disjointed, already was not doing Mike any favors. You know, if all 4 of them were on the high ground, that would have been a much easier hold, but now things are going to get really awkward. Only a Viking, 2 more Hellions do pop, and that might just save the day. Viking can land here and actually be surprisingly helpful against the Lings.
Yeah, the Lynx do focus on the reactor for a little bit too long there, so a lot of them are going to lose their lives in that process. So yeah, there's going to be 1 Hellion at a time, but the 2 Hellions that are out are going to kill an awful lot of Zerglings, so something there that Pamim could have done better perhaps. Now getting another surround onto the Hellions, however, in the main base, and the SCVs also contributing. Good reaction there by Mike to use those SCVs, and we'll see if he can hold, as Pamim really doesn't like add-ons.
No, they do not. Mike cannot hold. GG. We can actually return to game for this one, though, as opposed to potentially just going into the transition here. Because we can discuss, perhaps, how exactly you should defend Ling Baneling.
Let's do that. Because
so I don't know if
be a rather common strategy.
Yeah, I would expect so, right? So I don't know if our observer's still in the game. I think they are, so we can get right back into it. Great. So if we just rewind, you know, pretty basically to 2 minutes ago, then we can show exactly how to do it. I guess we can even discuss exactly how to do the Ling Baneling strategy if you want to take that one, Cats, but I was going to discuss how to defend against it.
That sounds good.
Oh, a little bit of a tech hiccup there.
Oh, tech hiccup.
Pressing the wrong buttons. That's true, I am host. So let me rewind. There we go. Now we can get, if we have Starcraft up, we can get back into it. Okay, cool. So what happens, right? Mike actually is able to see that it's a Baneling bus with this Reaper. So that's really a great start here for any Terran players. They actually get the Reaper in. This is actually, you know, most of the time, it's this or a Roachwarren. That's what that Reaper is supposed to follow up scout. And sometimes that gets into the main, sometimes it doesn't. For most people out there, I would suggest actually diving in to the main, especially if you don't see a third base. So, you know what's happening. What's your response from there? Mike, he's got a main base with a high ground command center already helping him out. That means you don't have to worry about protecting a natural. And he's doing the right thing. He's getting Hellions. That is the response, is get Hellions. You can build a bunker. You can put your Reaper, you can put your Marine in it, and that does help. That would not be a bad move whatsoever to just help you out. But you should know that it's very committed by the Zerg player. So you should be willing to kind of say, okay, I'm going to invest into these things, because they're too basing. I will give kind of a little like credit to the play of it, I guess the not professional StarCraft players, which is that oftentimes we scout things and we say, I've seen pros do this. That's definitely going to happen in this fashion. And then, you know, the guy who's on ladder just doing whatever the heck he wants doesn't actually do the thing. They just macro out of it or something like that. So that's always a little bit of the conundrum. But just for now, say that, yeah, this is got to be worrisome. Maybe that Reaper could actually float in front of the natural, check for the Lings piling up. And then when you are double confirmed, that's when you can bring your Hellions up into the high ground, lift your natural command center, and just pair up your 4 Hellions. And then Mike did a pretty, you know, admirable job of trying to control them. He just didn't have them together. So that's the biggest difference.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I guess just the best position is probably just the ramp. It's a very neutral position where you have access to the main and the natural easily. And it's a choke, which is really bad for Zerglings and Banelings because they don't want to clump up. So all of your Hellions firing at once from a ramp are going to do a lot of damage. And again, you're in a neutral position where where you're still very close to your natural if you really feel the need to take that one. And yeah, I think also like your idea of just having the Reaper out there or double checking is a good idea, a good compromise. The Reaper is not going to contribute too much on the defense anyway, because you really want to focus on the Hellions primarily. And on the Zerg side of things, I think that just don't do Baneling busts unless you know they didn't open Hellions, because yeah, if they turn an open Hellion, it should not work. But if they didn't open Hellion, if they're doing something like double medevac opening or something like that, or 2-1-1, there is a much greater chance that if you can hit before those medevacs are out and they don't have full micro potential and they are situated in their natural, then you can cheese them out. And it is very much a cheese and a strategy that at the highest level shouldn't really work so often, but there are little timings that maybe you could exploit, or very niche situations where a Baneling bust could be the way to go. And yeah, I mean, at lower levels, look for those surrounds, I suppose. Like, look for your opponent's mistakes to capitalize on. So you want the surrounds. You want 5 Banelings to bust any add-ons or supply depots, which was the perfect number here for Panmem. And yeah, anything else is just cherry on top of the cake.
There you go. It is funny, but yeah, there's a reason that the Ling Baneling bust is pretty much never seen in pro games. And while we all can admit that we're not pro gamers, most of us anyways can admit that, there is always that little bit of sorry, cats.
I can admit that. What?
I said most of us can admit that we're not pros. But anyways, the situation is that, you know, even in the lower leagues, or kind of like, you know, 12 years into StarCraft, even in the non-professional leagues, we're talking about people actually having some semblance of Hellion control, because that is the biggest difference. If you have Hellions, you should be able to defend. Where I think if maybe we're talking about 2011 and someone has 4 Hellions against a Ling Baneling attack, we're giving as much credit to the Ling Baneling guy as to the Hellion guy. But
yeah. Rush distances were also much shorter in a lot of those maps, so there was actually more openings to do something like that.
Exactly, that's a very good point indeed. But now a little less on the strong side. Very much just a build order if you think you're gonna surprise your opponent. More power to you if you just want to have fun. But it's a reason maybe like a roach opener has gotten a little more in the standard. I am trying to get into another replay here, but it's currently just bugging out for me. So I'm gonna restart my Starcraft. We definitely have one more replay. We have time for at least one more replay. If it's as fast as that one was, then maybe 2. Before we get into our kind of little mini talk show. I think people will enjoy it. So let me get back in here. It could be that it's coming from, I think that maybe the Taiwanese region. Something in my StarCraft doesn't like that very much, but I'll try again. Also, my StarCraft was bugging out yesterday. I don't know if StarCraft's been kind of buggy for you lately, Cats.
It's mostly been fine, to be honest. But I only press the ladder button for the most part.
There's no other tests.
There's no other tests. Yeah, I would not know if anything else was broken.
Fair enough. All right, it does look like this one might just be broken for me, so apologies to the submitter here. Probably have to restart again, but we can get this replay up and running. Did you ever make a multiplayer shortcut for the replays on your desktop?
I did not. I heard Pig talking to Scarlet about that, though.
Really? So I did not watch this stream of Pigs. So the only reason I know this was actually even happening was that someone brought it up to me in my stream yesterday. They were joking that Pig wasn't, you know, listening and not doing what she said, but obviously all in good fun. But yeah, it's like...
It was an interesting stream for sure.
Was it?
I thought so, yeah. It was interesting.
And this, okay, so this one also can't be done because it's on a previous replay. So unfortunately, well, previous patches can be watched by a single person. They can't be watched by multiple people. But never fear, we still have even more And you guys are great. Actually submitting a lot of the links. Here we go. Sword SC2.
Sword SC2. Sounds familiar, actually.
Well, they were tweeting at Norton, so maybe that's why they're familiar.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, did I party invite? That's pretty cool.
You did. I was like, well.
I'll leave it. I don't know
I
how
guess,
I
you
did
know.
that even, yeah.
I don't want to make cats feel left out, so I'll accept that. All right. Finally got one working, guys. So we are going to be casting. So on Twitter, the name was, I just said it, Sword SC2. In game.
Oh, it's Neuro. Neuro's here.
Well, Neuro's clan, right? Or is that actually Neuro?
That's Neuro. All Might is Neuro.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, cool.
And Sword SC2 might be familiar because I might have played him. Like, I think I've seen the name in game.
Oh, fair enough. Well, in game, they're Nebaru.
Maybe change this name.
Yeah. But awesome. So we're not just getting some high-level masters, but we're also getting a famous person in here. Neuro's going to be playing. So is this like Neuro's just his ladder account? Or is it some like specific account, like a cheese account or something?
He has 2 accounts. I'm not sure if he's supposed to cheese or not on this one. I'm not sure what the deal is, but I know that he plays on both.
Cool. All right. I've always gone with every account that I've ever had was for like a singular purpose. So I have a casting account, I have a tryhard account, I have a cheese account.
Nice.
But I know other people don't do that. So yeah, this is confirmation. Let's get some introductions done. Let's go with the bottom left. I'm sorry. I was hoping to guess in anticipation of the observer. Anyways, in the bottom left, as the blue Zerg, the name says All Might, but it is really, truly Neuro.
And in the top right-hand side, the name says Nebaru, but it is really, truly Sword SC2. Presumably. Unless he submitted a replay on behalf of someone else.
That's a good point. Sometimes it does happen, but I think specifically he said some of my replays.
Nice.
So, yeah. Just 2 different names for, I guess, the ease here. We'll call All Might the Zerg Neuro. And we'll call Nebaru. Can't help but put on the attempted correct pronunciation of a name that probably actually is just a made-up name. Maybe it's Nebaru.
Nebaru.
But I want to go like really like anime style coolness. Nebaru.
I like it.
Thank you.
And yeah, there should be a little bit of a gap here between these players because Nebaru's MMR was something like 4,700, I think. Neuro should be around 51, 52 at least. But again, like you said, I don't know if this is an account where he does something or things funkier than on his other accounts. So we'll be looking out for that too.
Yeah, actually, Neuro was playing in the Open Cup. I believe on his Neuro account, if I remember correctly. So he was facing Epic, who's a pretty darn good North American Terran. Neuro was able to put up the first game was a pretty good fight, and funnily enough, I think it might have been on this map. To be really related. The second time wasn't nearly as good. Neuro had kind of a lackluster roach attack, but anyways, very recently getting some high-level TVZ practice, kind of where I was going with that. So not only do we perhaps have this MMR discrepancy, which is kind of putting Nebaru up as the I guess David here versus Goliath, but also that Neuro has recently gotten into practice with it. So I'm thinking this is a very recent replay if I looked at the date correctly, perhaps even as recent as yesterday.
It's got to be on this patch, so it has to be very recent, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And,
for sure for that. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, Epic, I mean, Epic is a beast, especially in TVC. One of the best North American Terrans, without a doubt. So yeah, that would be really good practice for Neuro if he put up a fight. That's something to be impressed by. I think really, yeah, I wouldn't have expected that. I get crushed by Epic almost every time.
Yeah, my only question when I started casting it was, I was like, well, Neuro, he's not trying to be full-time pro, he's good, right? But a lot of other things that he does on his stream. Epic is usually trying to be like, just like intentionally, sole purpose, very, very good player. But I know that sometimes when it comes to the North American players, there's always that question, vacation, school work, real life work, those things. So the only question I had was that Epic been playing recently. And I do think it ended up being a warm-up game because there was some, I think more glaring faults than I would expect from Epic on like his tank production, but that's not really pertinent to this particular game. Just the fact that All Might's, aka Neuro, is probably in a good headspace for it. He does get lings inside of Nabarro's main base. It's just really awkward. There's nothing particular to scouts, but that just gives All Might all the confidence in the world. And actually he's throwing down a Roach Warren, so maybe we're going to see what I saw, which was that Evolution Chamber getting a +1 carapace and going for a Roach attack.
Exactly, and that scout does tell Neuro that he doesn't need to make spores because this is likely going to be a medevac or a liberator, both of which you don't really need detection for, right? So if this was a tech lab on the starport, that would have been really good information to gather, but without that, he is going to be just fine for the time being. A few links do die out on the map to those Hellions, which may be a little bit of an oversight on the side of Neuro. The creep spread hasn't been amazing either, and that might give entry to these Hellions, but there's a trap getting set up, so good job from Nebaru to identify that and just back away.
Very good of him, actually. The both things were good, right? The test there, just in case Neuro didn't remake Lings. It was a bit of a greedy boy after losing the Lings to a Hellion fight earlier on, and then the realization that there very possibly could be Lings. So you definitely don't want to dedicate. You want to poke, you want to see, you want to be like, hey, did you not make Lings? But really you don't want to lose these Hellions yet because you don't have your third CC down. You don't have the Marine production to cover that third CC. So the Hellions still play a very vital role. And as I'm speaking, they actually get surrounded by the Lings. So that's going to make taking the third base a little more awkward for the Terran.
Yeah, but this was no small commitment from Neuro. That's a lot of units. So now he's droning up, but before this, he hasn't really taken a huge advantage on the drone department. He is dropping a Spire, but of a very low gas, now taking 2 gases in his natural and not taking the gases in his third yet. His fourth is also a little bit delayed. So there's a few things that haven't panned out too well for Neuro here, maybe playing overly cautious perhaps this game. So it's still very much an evenish game, I would say.
That's a very good point. Yeah, the drone count's not very good. The upgrade's non-existent. Evolution Chamber is non-existent for Neuro, so he's going to be way behind on there. And of course, despite having a lair, only just recently even adding on the Baneling Nest. If Nabarro, can attack, and they are going to load up 2 medevacs and fly across the map, again, a little dangerous, because maybe those Lings will find an open third base, but that's all right. Then Neuro's not going to have the best means of defense. Of course, they'll probably muster a defense, but it just won't actually be the easiest thing, especially if the 2 medevacs actually ended up going unnoticed. They do get found out, though, so gonna tuck himself into a corner, make the Lings obsolete in this case.
Yeah, and just this move out in itself also forces Neuro to make more units, so still the drone disparity is not huge. It's not what Neuro wants it to be. It's 65 workers to 62 on the other side. And Neuro is again over defending, and if this fourth hatchery is one of its only advantages, so good on Nebaru to kind of like try to pressure this and make something happen on this side. Not gonna be able to, but I like that he is moving out. He moved out as soon as those medevacs came out as well. He couldn't even load the full 2 medevacs, which is, maybe a little bit, it could have been a little bit cleaner, but I love that he is kind of hitting his timings as best as he can.
Exactly, because even though we see that there's a bit of a macro slip, and it's just, StarCraft 2 is a hard game, right? Even with a bit of a macro slip, there's a lot of other good instincts coming out from this Terran player. So the drops, the attempt to multitask, and then back at home, while they might be missing a couple of macro cycles, they are rallying to a very secure location, making sure that a run-by doesn't ruin their day. And their tank production also has been fairly consistent, which is usually lacking until basically upwards to Masters 2 or Masters 1. So a couple of good things going for Nabarro, but not actually dealing kind of that momentum building damage yet. Just doing things well enough. So Neuro is going to be able to defend, although distracted. Oh, really distracted. The drop in the natural is going to get damage and force the other drop to get more damage too. Oh. There's the good damage.
Yeah, Neuro does split his links eventually, but like you said, it's like a very good distraction, and Neuro is doing all the right things out on the map. And yeah, those tanks have been in very good positions as well the entire time. They're very difficult to reach by Roach, Ravager, or anything like that, but also against links. That first tank on the high ground got sieged instantly in a very good location as his drop was moving out. So he has been doing a very good job of covering their bases, and now a lot of tech labs here on this third. I'm not sure that that is the best place to have those, but preparing for a little bit of a switch, perhaps to add a few more Marauders and eventually perhaps Ghosts. I really like his approach overall.
Yeah. I want to point out one cool thing that Neuro did. He has been contaminating the factory, I think twice, maybe just the once, because eventually Marines did push the Overseer away, but that was pretty neat. And then one downside of what Nabarro is doing from the Terran perspective is, well, there's a couple things, right? So first of all, the tanks are no longer as good of units as the mutas come in here. They take out one, they take out the missile turrets. You would have wanted to be adding perhaps Widow Mines and Drilling Claws at this point, and maybe starting not necessarily a transition, but an addition. You can add more splash to the tank numbers you've been building. But then also no fourth command center. So it actually looked like an 8-Rax all in to begin with, but you don't get the tech labs on the extra 3 barracks when you do that. You don't get a second factory either, really. And if you do, it's only like after your first attempt to kind of push into the Zerg, then you get fourth, then you get tech labs. So what Nabarro is doing is kind of unintentionally limiting this mid to late game. So this push is actually really quite committed, and it's very dangerous to be this deep on a creep. But those Banelings did not know where they were going. Apparently they weren't targeting anything.
Yeah, an attack move would have been much better than the move command there next to the tanks from Neuro. He will get the cleanup here and defend his creep for the time being as the mutas pull back here. There is now those Drilling Claws and Widow Mine starting on the other side of the map, which is really good, like you were mentioning. I think a Thor wouldn't hurt either against these muta numbers. And Neuro that is moving across the map with a lot of army here. He is going to be looking for the deny onto the 4th base of Nevaru, and that is a really good move as well.
I feel this floating barracks, by the way. So it looks like Nabarro was maybe hoping to swap that off to a reactor or something like that, and then re-rallied elsewhere, so the barracks goes flying because it's up in the air. I do that all the time. It is unfortunately putting him back down on 7 barracks, but not the worst thing in the world. He's once again attacking with a sizable army, but we actually have that big problem that I find happens in about Masters 3 to Masters 2, the lack of factory production. The lack of splash is going to make any of these pushes incredibly difficult to achieve their goal.
Yeah, really good pre-spreads, however, is going to make the Banelings limited in what they can do. Still, it's a little bit too much on the side of Neuro, so Never will get cleaned up for the time being. And yeah, at least those reactored, or rather tech-lapped barracks are producing Marauders, so he's being consistent with that. Mines are here now, and they're gonna burrow and maybe find connections, but they're not that great. And so Neuro is gonna overwhelm here, goes for the tank on the high ground with the Muta, and Neuro is forced to pull back to his main base. This was a very, very good effort from Neuro, but it's looking like all Neuro right now. The supplies are still deceptively close, but Neuro has map control right now, and it's going to be difficult for Neuro to overcome.
Good last-second panic handling of this, though. Nabarro was clearly going to be on the ropes, and they actually said, you know what, I think I can handle this. They pull up the medevacs into the main base. The tank gets a couple extra shots before they get sniped by those mutas, and then actually Neuro overstays his welcome quite drastically with those mutas, loses a bunch of them. And why is the supply now in favor of the Terran? It wasn't just those last-second trades. It's the fact that Neuro's only been on sub-60 drones for like most of this game. So trying to commit with this many units, and especially as you start losing out on upgrade advantages, yeah, eventually you just start to peter out there.
Yeah, and he's doing more of that as there's another Ling run by, but good positions, good rally from Neveru all game long, like that you mentioned it earlier. They're being rallied into good positions, all of his units, so he's gonna deal with that just kind of by default, and that puts Neuro further behind, and now Neuro has a commanding lead in this game. I feel like Neuro had the momentum there to really close out things. To obviously, you don't want to be giving out any of those Muta for free, and he gave out like 5 or 6 of those. Those are extremely expensive units, and kind of tunnel visioned onto the natural base, whereas instead he could have gone to the third and just kind of closed things out a little bit more slowly, but perhaps worried about his low economy that you were talking about. And now it's looking like all Nevero here. It's Nero who has to make a huge comeback to win this.
Yeah, really good. Just kind of standing on the base that they created for themselves, right? So Nabaru, as I was pointing out, you know, if Nero was playing up to 70, 80 drones, was trying to kind of encompass the map and really just do the Zerg swarm thing, then Nabaru's later fourth command center is problematic, but because it was actually kind of almost like a low econ situation for both of them, the Terran player ended up having that stronger base. They had that stronger stance. So if they could just hold a line against that kind of momentum shift, then they were going to come out ahead, and that's exactly what has happened. Super far ahead. Now, Nabaru just stimming and winning into the creep. No big deal. Even the Banelings coming in one at a time are going to be super ineffective, and Neuro has to tap out. Well played, Nabaru.
Yeah, very well played. And the economy of Neuro was never able to get going. I think that he played a little bit overly cautious in the early game. We were talking about it, right? Like he wasn't droning up. He was being forced to make units, or thought that he was forced to make units. In my opinion, he obviously overmade a few units a couple of those times, right? Overreacting to the two medevacs. But that is also to Nevero's credit, just moving out as soon as he could, as soon as they, you know, got the opportunity to load up those medevacs, even if they weren't full. And that's what they did, and yeah, takes the game. Very nice.
Very nice indeed. That was a bit tricky there. I was afraid that the attacks weren't going so well for the Terran, which can happen, but yeah, Neuro was actually, he kind of hardly had his feet under him at the end of the day. So, nicely done. That's going to be it for the replay review portion of this stream. Thank you very much to everyone who submitted the replays. Apologies to the people who submitted replays, but then just StarCraft 2 actually couldn't play them out. This is basically what happened. But fortunately, I had some backups, so it was really appreciated that everyone sent them in. I do replays, you know, on my own channel, and a lot of other streamers do as well. So if you do want to get your replays cast by one of us, then there's always those opportunities. But guys, we're going to go into our second portion of the show. Just making sure that we're on time here. We're pretty much perfectly on time. There's a giveaway happening in chat, so type key for me to learn more about that. We're going to go to a quick break, and when we come back, it's going to be a little mini talk show talking about the patch, Katowice, and Caster's Civil War.
Nightmare!
What is it this time?
We're down by 1. My shield is at full power. And there's 10 seconds left. The ball goes up in the air and I rev up to get it, and then slow, lag, everything gone.
Relax. You have Norton 360 for gamers with Game Optimizer. You don't have to worry about lag.
I have Game Optimizer. Everything good?
Breathe in. You are a gaming legend. You are a king among streamers. You have power over hackers, malware, and viruses. You are cyber safe.
One to the Norton Gaming Community Showcase for StarCraft 2. We just went over a handful of replays submitted by the community. Again, thank you very much to those who submitted. And now we're going to get into some of basically the current topics of StarCraft 2. And the first thing we're going to go over actually is Katowice. It's the first thing on the docket. So unfortunately, Katz, you couldn't join us in person at the event, but you were casting one of the B streams alongside Drogo. I just want to ask in general, how did that go? How were the long hours, just the two of you?
It was really fun, actually. Yeah, Drogo's a really funny guy, and he's obviously very insightful, especially when it comes to Protoss matchups. So it was really a good experience. I kind of got to provide a list of people that I'd like to work with, and like originally it was going to be Harstem, but then Harstem got kind of drafted to Katowice. So I thought Drogo would be a great choice, and yeah, he proved to be so. So I enjoyed it a lot.
I saw a lot of people really enjoying the banter between you two, and I know the long hours on the B stream is something I'm very familiar with from the past, and I know for a fact that it can get a little bit how to say, you can get tired, you can get a little silly, yeah. After a while, and it just creates somewhat of a more fun atmosphere. So. How many, like, which really good games did you guys get? Because I know there was a ton of good games in Katowice, and they all couldn't be on the mainstream.
Yeah, I would say my favorite one was the Scarlet versus Clem series. In particular, Game 2 was my favorite game that I watched and casted, but obviously I was very absorbed in that game. So it was, yeah, you know, it's a very memorable experience. It was crazy.
I thought you casted it, but I wasn't 100% sure. But yeah, I was not even on the desk, I think, for that one. I might have been casting the, game that was actually happening. I'm not sure, but I basically walked up, and then they were talking about this insane game that just happened. And so I finally got to cast it on my own channel with the replays. And yeah, it's March of 2022, and that was already a contender for Game of the Year.
Yeah, it was absolutely bananas. No spoilers. You guys can check it out on Zombie Grab's channel, or I'm guessing a lot of other people have casted it. But it was an amazing game. Really worth watching. So do check it out if you didn't.
And there is a lot of games worth watching in Katowice. So let's actually talk about the top 8, I suppose, and how the actual results went out, because there was a ton of great games in the playoff. So as you can see. Big spoiler alert, I suppose. Should have done that first, but don't know what you guys expect in a talk show talking about Katowice. First place went to Cyril, who finally gets that Katowice win. And runner-up was Rainer, but it was one hell of a finals. It was fantastic. I think exactly what we were hoping for when we saw that it was these two players. You know, there might have been some moaning and groaning in chat about it being a Zerg versus Zerg, but Rainer and Cyril, just like, despite any changes to the meta in ZVZ, I feel like they've pretty much always given us great best ofs. There's only like 1 or 2 best of 5s or best of 7s that I can think where it wasn't the greatest series of all time between the two, but most of them are pretty darn good.
Yeah, completely agreed. I mean, 2 of the absolute best, obviously, as they finished at first and second, needless to say. But yeah, they have given each other a lot of trouble. It's the previous champion against now the current champion, Cyril. And it was an amazing series. I thought it started a little bit slower in terms of gameplay. Like, I thought they were making a few more mistakes than they usually do. But the fact that it was a 4-3 and that it was very back and forth, and the level of play that they offer obviously is beyond what just about anyone can do. So it really was amazing.
And actually, speaking of some of the, I suppose, surprising starts to that day. So that day was the finals and the semifinals, guys. So, taking in 3rd, 4th here, we have Rogue and Hero Marine. So Rogue kind of got bopped by Cyril. I wasn't going to bring that up. But Hero Marine almost surprised everyone by, well, he already surprised the beginning of the semifinals, making it to the finals. He was awfully close to 3-0ing Rainer. And I don't know if this is like super public, but basically what happened was that Rainer approached his semifinal as the warm-up. He didn't actually do that much warming up before he faced off against Hero Marine. And some of that I'm sure had to do with the fact that it was kind of an early start to the day for the two, but I thought that was funny. So he had to kind of kick his brain into gear.
Yeah, yeah, I suppose so. I mean, he sometimes does have those slower starts, Raynor does, and it had to be an immense amount of pressure on the side of Hero Marine, but props to him. I mean, starting 2-0, it looking like it could be a 3-0 was definitely impressive, and the games were very good, very evenly matched as well, so not to take anyone from the anything from the German here. I think he did he had his most impressive run yet in an illustrious career already, so that's amazing for him.
Yeah, and especially when you consider, and I feel like it kind of got lost in the downtime we had between tournaments. He said he was going to stop focusing on full-time pro gaming.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he did I think it was at the end of DreamHack Winter. So there's a couple of questions as to how that, what did that really mean? Because for some players, it means I'll stop playing when I stop playing. I'm just open to the idea of stopping playing,
Yeah.
For some others, it means that they have a boost in performance pretty much right after, because like the pressure is off, and then they decrease in skill. But for Hero Marine, it basically came to be like it doesn't feel like it's any different, and it feels like he actually even got better, and not just temporarily. He just got better in general. So that was 4 or 5 months ago. Yeah, that winter happened compared to Katowice. So yeah, I don't know what happened with that or what is happening with that.
Yeah,
but
that's
Hero
a
Marine,
strange one.
yeah, he gets his best performance of his lifetime.
Yeah, a very strange statement to make, because I guess maybe he feels like he's focusing more on streaming or something of the sorts. I wonder what that entails, to stop focusing on pro gaming. I suppose maybe just doing a little bit less off-stream practice. I mean, streaming is definitely something that will weigh on you a little bit, and the quality of your gameplay, if you're focused on also commentating and stuff like that, it's definitely not going to be as good as you can be playing tournaments or just giving yourself any time you want to analyze the replays that you lose or something like that, right? Because you're worried about the audience. So maybe that's what he means. But I think he's been playing as much as he has ever played. So there's that also.
Yeah. I think you're right to bring in kind of the question of like, oh, is he just going to focus more on streaming? And I think that was kind of the gist. And then he was thinking about going back to school. But again, it pretty much people were sad to hear it, but we didn't really know what the future entailed, because just with pro game retirements or different focusing, or however they put it, it's always up in the air what that really means. But apparently for Hero Marine, it means kind of nothing. He just continues being really good, continues winning a bunch of open cups, is constantly streaming, and still ends up getting to the semifinals of Katowice. And to finish off this particular graphic, 5th through 8th guys, Dark, Solar, Bunny, and Maru. So all of the Koreans actually getting stuck prior to the semifinals. Big difference between this and previous Katowices. It's kind of an insane list of people to see there that aren't in the semis, that aren't in the finals. But we also had some of our best games of, again, 2022 perhaps, super early on in those quarterfinals. Raynor versus Dark really proved how much Dark could turtle. Solar versus Hero Marine, epic base trades, and Cyril Maru finally happening again, right? It wasn't necessarily the best of 5, but it still has those Titans, the name, the alone do the trick kind of thing. And even Bunny Rogue was surprisingly good, especially because they ended up playing at about 1 in the morning.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Bunny topped his group, Solar topped his group, so it's a little bit sad for them to have that sort of performance and coming into the playoffs and not do as well, but to be expected with the level of competition, right? Like Solar fall into Hero Marine, and Bunny, I believe, to Rogue, which, no shame in that. It's probably one of the opponents, if not the opponent, that Bunny didn't want to face. And Maru versus Cyril, Maru could say the same. I mean, if he hadn't run into Cyril, who knows? Maybe we would have had a Maru-Cyril finals, and maybe it would have been a much worse finals, judging by the series that they did end up having, right? And Dark versus Raynor was really, really good, and it was good to see Raynor kind of switch gears during the series and kind of adapt to what Dark was doing and just be willing to play that same style rather than being the Raynor that we usually see against the likes of Cyril, right? So kind of giving a nod of respect to a Dark that was expertly turtling up with those lurkers and not trying to break them, but just kind of sit passively in those in that last game, I believe, or towards the end of the series where he kind of turned it around.
Yep. So that's the top 8 finishers of Katowice, guys. But I just want to add on here for a Katowice discussion, just the amount of, there was awesome games, And there's also really just awesome storylines. You know, it kind of felt like Katowice, it had everything that you would want in a StarCraft 2 tournament. There was outside factors, let's just put it that way, that made things kind of, I don't know, a bit odd about it. But the actual games, the storylines, I think the appreciation of the casters at an all-time high. I think everyone just felt really happy to be at an offline event, or to see an offline event happening with players there. And then the actual game quality far, I think, even exceeded expectations, considering what, you know, Last Chance had, which was a couple of good games, but overall maybe not the best. We had that pretty really boring DreamHack Fall, was it? The one that Cyril won? And it was just like no game was good. We were worried about like the patch not having coming out right. So, you know, what is the meta going to look like? Is it going to be stale? Is it going to be boring? And instead, it was, I think, one of the best tournaments that we've had in StarCraft 2. And 2021 was also a really good tournament, even though that was online. So Katowice, I guess, now is building up more of that expectation of better games and better stories. Whereas I think in the past, it was always hit or miss. Good semis, bad finals, or vice versa, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that would help, and I'm not sure if it did help here, but a little bit longer of a gap where we don't or can't know how the players are doing, and they get kind of like a little bit more of breathing room to kind of prepare and show their best at Katowice is pretty important. And yeah, because even the round of 36 was great, right? And like we had like a lot of players showing up that I wouldn't have expected to show up in the fashion that they did, and there was like hype being created around some of these players. Where Cyril's talking about how good Soul is right now, for example, Spirit, I guess. And then Spirit had some really good performances as well, right? Like leading up to the group stages and even in the groups. So so yeah, that's always cool to see stories developing and a little bit of surprise to not just the audience, but also the casters and the players themselves as far as like what their form is and whatnot.
Right. I think the overall narrative is tainted a little bit by the naysayers, basically, right? Who are like, you know, surprises, Cats, you're crazy. Zerg won. How is that a surprise? And I guess they're not wrong. Zerg's now won the past 5 Katowices. But, like, I would say, yeah, there was still a ton of surprises, right? There was Ryung popping off and being, you know, really good in his kind of first, well, for a lot of these people, it's their first offline tournament with the whole COVID thing. But, you know, afterwards coming back from military, yeah, Spirit doing really well in that grueling open bracket. And then here, Marines victories. Even Raynor no longer, I feel like Raynor wasn't necessarily really the comeback kid. He had a couple of really good comebacks, but he really earned that nickname in this tournament. So that was also very surprising. You never really knew if Raynor was going to bomb out, especially because leading up to Katowice, Raynor was in that once again state of, wait, is he lagging here? Or is he not doing so well? Which happened in 2021 too. The month leading up to the event, people were really worried about Raynor's performance, and then he just turns it on for the biggest event of the year.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Estrella also finishing 2-3 in groups in a very difficult group, but he also had amazing games, and he also destroyed the round of 36. It was just an absolute pleasure to watch. Estrella, probably, if I had to pick my favorite player to watch during the tournament or that I followed during the tournament, it had to be Estrella for me, because even though his run ended early, he is just such, you know, he really brings North American StarCraft to the table, where he is just extremely creative. He has his own flair, and he does his thing his own way, and it's just super fun to watch. That the fact that he can compete at the highest level and kind of take games off of anyone. I hope that we have Estrella stepping up to be a champion in years to come, because, you know, that's the kind of champion that I want.
He's a very fun player to watch, and his presence in Group C really ended up making it more of a nail biter than was necessarily expected. Trap only barely making it out. And Zess not able to actually get to the playoffs of Katowice, which doesn't happen too often for him. He was in the last 2 and missed out on the chance for number 3. But yeah, there's a Lambo didn't perform super well, but then just seeing his name on Group C, his signature series video was,
Oh, that was
I
great.
think, the best.
I
don't know
so.
if you, yeah,
I
okay, so.
agree.
a just really strong storyline, and just like a little tidbit out there, cool behind the scenes factoid here for the listeners of the Norton Gaming Twitch channel. The producer for the DreamHack events, the person that we're working alongside all the time for the past 2 years, she actually was the one that ended up editing that mini documentary. And I told her, and I was like, I have big expectations since you're the one doing it. She pretended to get all nervous, but I think a lot of us actually reached out to her and were like, that was actually really well done.
Yeah, yeah. Kasha's amazing, and she's a very, I guess, empathetic person, and I think she really brought that to the video, right? Like just highlighting things that would humanize Lambo a lot, I guess, and just like kind of bring out like different aspects and facets. And it had a build up that was lacking a little bit in the Raynor video. It had consistency. It was just a really good video, and it was surprising to me because talking to Lambo before the video, like he was asking me like what should I do, like I don't have anything interesting to bring up, like I'm like what do I talk about, like and it's and the fact that it ended up being my favorite one to watch, after both of the people involved, I guess, in Kasha and Lambo were kind of just like not super sure how it would pan out into being what it was. Yeah, it was awesome to watch.
It's the real strength of a good editor, because I know that Raynor talked about having a lot more that he gave to the people basically collecting the footage, right? And his was actually one of the shorter ones. And they missed a couple of key points, in my opinion. Not to rag on it, but it just the difference between that and then the maybe more limited footage, but still able to kind of find that really strong story thread. This idea that Lambo is a player, not necessarily because it's his best role, but because it's the one that's immediately available in StarCraft. But if he could be a coach. I think we all really agree with that. It was just super well done. It really felt like a mini documentary you might see on TV or something like that. But anyways, the other narrative, I guess, for the Katowice that we need to kind of discuss, because that is it's where the clicks come in, cats. Are Koreans worse than foreigners now?
I don't know. I expected Koreans to overperform at Katowice, because that's kind of what the year was leading up to, I think. And the prior year to that, it felt like the opposite. But yeah, things are always shifting in StarCraft. And really, when you talk about the best players, I'm not even sure that it's fair to put flags next to their name, because it's always the same ones too, right? Like popping off, it's really always Serral, Raynor, just more than anyone else, I guess, in recent history. Sometimes Clem, sometimes Hero Marine, sometimes Showtime. But yeah, those guys, if they are in shape, they'll carry the non-Korean stitched up flag really well. And if they're not, then the Koreans, there's a lot more of them that can really step up to the plate, I feel like.
Right. I don't think you can actually look at Katowice's results as a whole and say that the Korean players are performing necessarily all that much worse. It really is just kind of two standout players who have always, for years at this point, have been going toe-to-toe with the top-tier Korean players. And then every so often kind of a third miscellaneous foreigner, non-Korean, that is. So, not to call them miscellaneous to be rude, just kind of, it can be a lot of different people. There's a variety of the third people who can appear in the round of 8, for instance. So Hero Marine was the one in this case. But last year, Showtime was in the round of 12, for instance, right? And then Neeb was in the round of 12 another time, and so on and so forth. But Raynor and Serral ended up being the standout characters in our fight against the Korean players. And they certainly proved that they are, perhaps at that moment of Katowice, they were better than what Korea had to offer. But it's not like Korea was actually slacking. They still had the most numbers to put up for the round of 12.
For sure. And one thing that I will do, and that is one of the hot topics as well, I think that Serral definitely looked like the best player in the world throughout the entire tournament and ended up winning, so rightfully so. And he is, 200 points away from anyone else in a Legulag. A lot of people don't like to look at a Legulag and think that it means much, but 200 points ahead of anyone else, I mean, he is just an absolute beast right now. And making a further case for being the GOAT, which was, like I was starting to say, I don't know, maybe Maru is the GOAT after all. And, I was a little bit sad about that because, in my heart, I always wished that it was Serral. And now it's, maybe Serral's the GOAT.
That is the hot topic. You're right about that. That's what's going to get people really feisty. Is Serral actually the GOAT? Because that was probably the most contentious point of the StarCraft 2 community leading up to Katowice. Not one that I particularly took seriously, just because I feel like it's always going to be mostly an opinion-based thing. But it just, people love discussing it. So the options are Serral, Rogue, and Maru. It's kind of it, especially if the current gen. Let's put it that way. And now with Serral not just winning Katowice, but kind of dominating the other two contenders on his path too, it gives a lot more credit to the people who say that Serral is the greatest of all time. But,
it can be the thing is, it can be ever shifting, right? It doesn't have to be a static statement, because we still have tournaments and results coming in, and Katowice is one of those things that will actually weigh enough to where you can actually make shifts. So if it was really close and maybe Maru was pulling a little bit ahead, maybe Serral's pulling a little bit ahead now in that race to the GOAT. And, you know, if they close the game today, I'd have to look back and say, yeah, Serral was the greatest of all time.
And Raynor is trying to make a case for it as well. If he had gotten back-to-back Katowice champions, that is the global championship, then it would be just him and, him and SOS for the double. But was it back-to-back? Or SOS?
Did SOS get a triple even? No, just double, right?
I think it was just double.
Just
yeah.
double, yeah.
But we'd have to double-check that. You know, basically, if we wanted to go with that narrative, we would have brought it up on Katowice after doing our due diligence. But at the time, I just remember being super excited for the finals.
Yeah, I feel like Raynor lacks that period of absolute domination that Serral has, that Maru has had, that Rogue had as far as like tournament results. But I am with you. If he got the back-to-back Katowice and maybe like a third one next year, then I'd be like, okay, Raynor GOAT, you know, because for me, the GOAT is a thing that has to stretch over all time, right? And you know, and Raynor just hasn't had that longevity, I guess, at the top that others have had.
Part of the GOAT is that it's all time, but it can't actually be all time, which is where I start to get kind of a little disinterested in the conversation, because there is actually no way to test MVP versus innovation versus Serral or something, you know, whoever you think would be the previous contenders for the greatest of all time. There just isn't.
Yeah. True, but I mean, there is the length of time that they dominated for. I suppose they are different skill sets, but if you wanted to look at skill alone, it's very clear that the skill is higher today. But I think you're right in that, you know, it's different skill sets that you're required to be very good back then and that you're required to be very good now, right? Like you had more creative players back then, kind of like doing better. And for me, in that case, it would just have to be how long did they last? And while they had periods of dominance and they lasted a long time, I feel like we're approaching a point where, you know, like the players that are still around and will continue to persevere and will continue to do well are likely just outlasting MVP and Nesty and those guys by a long shot.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Nesty is a great name to bring back to, right? But I don't think he's ever really, since like 2015.
GOAT status?
Been, contender for GOAT. But MVP with all his GSL victories, right? That's the ticket for him, and innovation just being insanely consistent for so long. But then, you know, as a game or competition in general increases its lifespan, then you have the people who only played for 3 years and dominated those 3 years being GOATs for those 3 years, but then they retire, and then people who played for 6 years and dominated for 3 of those 6 years might be a little more in the contention because they've been playing for longer. And fair. I don't know. I always kind of like bring up the analogy of being like a basketball GOAT, the conversation where you basically have like 80 years or maybe not that long, but still, of players. And I'm sure that there's a bunch of older folk who are saying some guy in like the 70s, right?
Yeah,
Magic
because they
Johnson's
didn't
the
play
GOAT.
each other, right? Like like in football, there's always like Pelé or Maradona or like Messi now, and there are different generations that didn't overlap with each other, so it's very difficult to know who would have been the greatest of all time. But if you look at footage, you know that, you know, Maradona was better than Pelé and Messi is better than Maradona, and so on and so forth. So
10 Europeans in chat are getting angry right now.
Ronaldinho has to be thrown in there. Yeah.
Who? What?
Ronaldinho. Ronaldinho.
What? Who?
Ronaldinho. You don't know Ronaldinho?
I actually don't. I recognize some of the other names. And I did spend a flight going to Sweden once watching a mini football documentary about some of the
nice.
greatest names in sports. So I have some knowledge, but not a lot.
Nice.
Anyways, that is always a fun conversation to have. GOAT status and or the Korean versus non-Korean narrative. It's the only way I think the finals would have been better is not even necessarily if it was not a ZVZ, but I think that's also something people said about it. But also if it was a non-Korean versus Korea, still is the hypest thing that you can really give people, and probably will be for the next couple of years. Maybe if we're looking at 5 years down the line, it's going to be different, but for the next couple of years, for sure.
For sure.
So I think that kind of wraps up our wtih discussion. Unless you had anything last second you wanted to bring up about it.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, just for me, I really would like for it to be a bit longer as far as the days, because those were the amount of days, I should say, because the limited amount of days that we got were, they were super long days. We'll look into that for wtih 2023. And now we can discuss the patch. So kind of bridging this conversation too, I will say that at wtih, fortunate enough to sit down with the players during breakfast. Some of the only time I really had to sit down with people, just not our coworkers. And they were discussing the patch. I had heard about the Queen thing, and I was actually quite impressed to hear that they weren't just tweaking numbers. So with the patch talk now, I guess we can also bring up what exactly that patch is. But initial impressions, Katz, when you first read the patch notes, what were you thinking?
I mean, like I've always liked big change. This is a very player-driven patch. It's a committee of players, effectively, that was working on the patch with whoever's left at Blizzard, right? Which is probably just the person implementing the patch, and ESL, I guess, facilitating it to some degree. So for me, I wish it was a bigger patch, but that's always going to be what I wish for. As far as what tweaks were made, I think they're sensible, right? Like there are things that people have been asking for a while, but yeah, we could go into each individual one and talk about them a little bit more, I guess.
Sure, let's do that. So first and foremost, we have the shield battery. The starting energy reduced from 100 to 50 outside of the Nexus field. That's what that is. So that's like the field that pops up when you're trying to place down a shield battery, and it's a little more blue, I guess, than the regular blue. Basically telling you what's going to be overchargeable. Now also affects the amount of energy that it starts with. So specifically, guys, it's going to try and take away the power of any cannon rush into shield battery proxy shenanigans, or just straight up the void ray proxy with the shield batteries, which I know leading up to the patch, people were spamming. Like, they were the last little drops of water they were ever going to get. I faced a lot of them. But now with the patch, have you experienced a lot of the proxy void ray stuff?
No, not at all. And that is, very targeted towards, I think, the proxy void ray, especially at higher levels. Lower levels, we still see in North America in particular, there's a lot of there was a lot of cannon rush into Immortals, into War Prism, right? And just kind of like going from there with a lot of shield battery contain. So we're going to definitely see a lot less than that. And yeah, that was the problem that they were trying to address, and I think it does so successfully.
Yeah, I think so. I have not heard really any complaints about this. I have heard complaints about the patch, but we'll get into it kind of after all the details. Next up, we have Dark Templar. Now has a 0.75 second attack delay after blink. So this was very much targeted towards the planetary snipes in PvT. And have you seen a lot of effectiveness here? I actually do feel like there is a little noticeable delay, but overall, it's not as noticeable as some of the other things we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, I haven't noticed it myself. I don't play the matchup at the moment. I'm only playing Zerg, so I haven't suffered too much on either end of the spectrum for this change. It seems fairly insignificant, and it does make me a little bit sad that DTs are less likely to be used offensively against little armies as well, because I really liked seeing DTs blinking into like a group of Marines and kind of just shredding that. I think that we're going to see an effect there. On planetary fortresses, I guess it gives the player a little bit more time to react and get the repair off. So there's that, but otherwise, yeah, it shouldn't be of great consequence.
Right, and that's really the target, the goal of this patch, it feels like, is to not make anything like super impacted, but just a little bit. And this was one of them. So most likely targeted towards that planetary snipe. But yeah, it also does include any of the players who are trying to use DTs to blink onto bio. And I know that's not really a pro gamer thing to do, but Zest was experimenting with some like purposeful like DT production to get that blink force field, if you will. So that also got nerfed a little bit. And now we get in a void race. So increased build time from 37 to 43 seconds, and increased the mineral costs from 200 to 250. And I think we have seen the impact of both the void ray and shield battery nerfs for Protoss.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is one of the bigger changes, obviously, and I think that these two last changes do impact the game a little bit significantly in the matchup, and particularly in CVP. And I'm not sure that it does so in the way that you would envision is healthy, at least from my perspective. But obviously, yeah, void rays were being spammed. They were a little bit too good, a little bit too multi-purpose, perhaps. So adding the extra 5 seconds to production is relevant to, you know, just the void ray coming out a little bit slower, being less spammable, and some sort of defenses as well, and counterattacks, making void rays reactively. But the cost is also a nerf that in the early game will gate the void ray to an extra 50 minerals worth of time added to the 5 seconds, right? So it's not irrelevant. The void ray is going to be a little bit later and less spammable, basically.
Exactly. So someone did the math on how many void rays you'd have for a very typical queen walk, and I think the math ended up being like 2 less void rays, which is pretty considerable. But of course, the queen walks are also in question right now. But in general, the void ray play, not just as far as defending, if we think about that, but also obviously on the attack, going for a void ray style, going for some of those void ray build up to the 7 or 8 numbers and go running around killing things. That's also going to take longer to get to and be less effective. So, yeah, it's again very targeted towards something in particular, but not trying to like overplay the nerf and make it impossible to build void rays. But this one was definitely one of the bigger ones with the 6 second increase. Math is always hard. The queen, though, that one is the one that I thought was most interesting because it feels like, especially Blizzard, but I'm pretty sure this is just a problem in most games, is that the numbers get tweaked. And funnily enough, often it's like the speed gets tweaked. And they're like, yep, we did it, guys. We fixed everything. The speed's changed. And it's like, well, okay. I guess maybe that was what needed to be changed. But I absolutely love when they actually change things about the game without just saying, oh, the number's a bit different. So Queens just not being able to transfuse off of creep was the biggest thing for me, not just because it's big impact on pro games, but because it changed the entire dynamic of the queen, which I'm actually in favor of. I wish they'd make it a little more obvious. There's no graphical indication that she no longer can transfuse, but still.
Yeah. I think that this is the sort of change that indicates that the patch is very player driven, and that wouldn't have gone through if there was developers kind of gating changes, because like you said, like you just mentioned, like that criticism that you had is exactly why. It's because it is not very intuitive that the queen can do something on creep that it can't do off creep. I believe that every other Zerg ability of creep kind of remains the same, and the main thing that changes is kind of just the movement speed and so on. So this is now introducing something that to a new player would be very unintuitive and would feel like a bug to start off. So I'm not in favor of that from a design perspective. I think that it's clunky. I think it's an inelegant change. But from a balance perspective, it serves its purpose, right? They don't want for the queen walks without layers. So they're basically gating queen walks behind a layer timing, or very creative solutions like dropping a hatchery on the other side of the map and canceling it and making a creep tumor or something of the likes. Right. So from that perspective, it's cool. And combined with the previous, now to talk about both changes together, the void ray does gain an increase in power from this change, in the sense that you can just make one void ray as a Protoss player and be mostly just safe, because then the Zerg player would have to commit, like if they want to all in into your third or your fourth, then they have to commit knowing that they need a layer beforehand, which will make it so that I think Protoss players will start at least experimenting with being even greedier in the early stages of the game, going to a fourth base even off of less units. So so it's scary for that reason, because I think it removes aggressive potential from Zerg, which yes was annoying for Protoss, but we already had a turtling problem in the matchup, and I think this serves to exacerbate that, not to help it.
That's interesting perspective. For the most part, I've heard people just being positive about the Queen Walk. For me, I am 100% with you on the design as far as that kind of streamlined, everything kind of fits its puzzle piece in StarCraft. When you play StarCraft, things kind of work as intended and as you think they're going to work. And if, you know, it's not immediate obvious, it's usually like pretty obvious after the fact. So how does a siege tank work? Oh, I siege it, then I shoot. Okay, great. Whereas the Queen, especially without that graphical addition, is just, it's not intuitive. So that was my biggest problem with that. And I tried to explain kind of that thought process too, that I actually give Blizzard a lot of credit for to streams. And I'm not sure I ever do quite the good job, but I know that you've even worked with Blizzard, and basically Blizzard has said openly to us, like summits, that they don't do some things because it would not be intuitive to the new player. So I know in past chats with people, and actually in the chat right now, we had someone say, like, what if they can't transfuse within a certain range? And I said, well, having a range kind of be that indicator of a spell is actually being viable is actually quite counterintuitive. So that would mean you'd have to constantly hover over the transfuse ability and see if you're in range. Whereas at least if it's off creep, it's a little more, it's like kind of obvious. You know, once you get the gist of it, you're like, oh, off creep, on creep. But they needed to make something actually graphical for it. So that's an interesting part of game design, in my opinion, that people don't give Blizzard a lot of credit for.
Yeah. Even with a graphic, that would be a special case. And Blizzard, in particular, like the devs, they never like to make any special cases for anything. And some of them were silly. Like, for example, like some units have more shields than they have. Some Protoss units have more shields than they have HP, like the Archon, for example. But it is not the case for buildings. So whenever there was a suggestion, for example, to decrease the HP or the shields of a shield battery to kind of address the same problem that was addressed earlier in this patch, they were like, no, because all Protoss buildings have the same HP. I'm like, really? But I didn't know that, and I don't think anyone would notice. So that is the level of consistency that they look for. So this Queen change, I assure you, it would have never flown with a team of developers and designers behind it. Yeah,
it's an awesome example, though. I feel like it's like the easiest way I can explain kind of this idea is with that the building one. So thank you, KatZ.
Yeah. And if you look at other games, like for example, like Dota, they are really freaking bad at this, where you don't know how things work, right? And I love Dota, but if you go and try to figure out interactions, they have very clunky design, which is fair because they have so much, like there's such a big breadth of stuff, but you have to kind of find out through the vine and ask people, like, how does this interaction actually work? In StarCraft, it's all very crystal clear, so I am very much, again, against the clunkiness of design there, and I hope they look out for that, because if they kept doing this over time, the game would turn into very unintuitive, where people are just confused about, like what's going on, like in Dota.
Right. That's awesome examples. Awesome examples and comparisons. Definitely a whole thing we can talk about. It very much goes in line with just kind of the general idea of game design. But yeah, especially with speaking to the developers who have now moved on to the Frost Giant, hearing those kind of perspectives and reasonings is often just what the rest of us don't think about. Not just the rest of us non-game developers, but the rest of us like non-game developers who also don't have like 20 years of experience, right? That type of thing. So it's always fascinating to hear those details, things you don't necessarily think about, but when you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, okay, that's one of the reasons why StarCraft feels so great. Fantastic. But we do have to kind of move on here. So we do have further balanced patch notes. Widow Mine does get changed. Its drilling clause gets reduced from 0.07 to, or 1.07 to 0.71 rather. So they get decreased in the amount of time it takes for the Widow Mines to burrow. I felt like the wording on this, on the patch notes, was very awkward. Reduce the effectiveness, but I think we generally get what it means. Now widow mines don't burrow as fast when they get drilling claws. So have you seen a lot of impact from this change?
I haven't. I'm not sure what problem it's supposed to be addressing either, because it seems like the main go-to Zerg army composition is Ling Bane, for example, and Widow Mines are good against Ling Bane, and I don't think that there's an issue in the matchup. So maybe it's mostly for PvT, I'm guessing, and Widow Mine drops?
I think so, yeah. So I think that that's one of the approaches, is that they thought it was a bit absurd if there was a Widow Mine cheese with drilling claws, that the probes really stood no chance. But I do actually also believe that this was for the ZVT market. It was the way I was going to put that. And I was going to save this for the end of the last point, but I guess I'll bring it up now. This patch as a whole does feel like it is very much geared towards not just making sure to put a light touch on the game for the most part, but also geared towards the most common complaints. It basically is treating some of the more absurd feeling things in the game, even if they aren't necessarily imbalanced. And I felt like the Widow Mine was kind of one of those things where I never really saw that much of a problem when I was casting pros and them dealing with Widow Mines. Most of the time they weren't game ending, but to a lot of other people, 100% they were shouting, it's too often game ending, it's too often difficult to control against, it's definitely favoring the Terran, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, because I actually feel like this is a very pro player driven patch for the most part. So like maybe from my perspective this must be a TVP issue, and I do see TVPs where Widow Mines just kind of, you know, kill a little bit too much and the Protoss players are a little bit too slow to respond. So my best guess is they gathered a group of pros and they asked them like what is broken from the other races, and they looked at ways to address that, and then they agreed on kind of like what would be fair and what not. Because like, do you feel like this would make a huge difference, like if a player below the pro level or even grandmaster level would have a lot more time to react to Widow Mines burrowing in their mineral line, or you know, or something like that? I feel like it's not really.
No, I don't think it makes a huge difference in a lot of ways. I don't think that 0.36 decrease is going to necessarily help out the pro Protosses either, but I do think that it basically alleviates a pain. So basically people complain about it, both pros and casual players, and any direction that's like, you know, positive for them, a change in favor of their anticipated problem, I can't react fast enough, is good. Like it kind of, it's not actually the healthiest thing for you to eat perhaps. Maybe it's actually not going to completely fix the game or fix your issue, but at the time it tastes pretty good. It fills you up. It's a nice like MRE bar or whatever the army eats. So I know a lot of people were very happy to hear about this, even though I would say that most people don't actually get affected by it.
Yeah, fair enough. One thing that it brings back to the table potentially, I personally don't think so, but I've heard conversations about like how it could, is Muta play in CVT, because Muta kind of get crushed by Widow Mines, and they're also kind of the counter to burrowing Widow Mines to some degree. So yeah, I think Silky was talking about like there's a North American group chat and he was bringing up how he was going to bring back Muta. I don't see it happening, but you know, it's on some people's minds. Yeah.
And just another quick point, you brought up your expectation of how this was done. You're pretty much on point. They created a huge like document and group where a lot of people could communicate, but it absolutely was not just the perceived top tier pros. There was a couple of people down, like I think 5.5k, 6k, something like that. It was a big pool of players that were trying to give input. So anyways, on to the lurker. And as far as I know, no content creators were actually approached, because I know that was kind of vague in the actual patch notes. They were like gonna thank people and then they didn't thank people. But as far as I know, none of the casters were approached. No like content creators were approached. So just want to make that clear. And now we move on to the lurker. Reduce the effectiveness again. Lurkers burrow slower. So in the exact same change of speed as the Widow Mine. which I think this has been the most visibly obvious to me. I really think that this looks different.
Yeah, definitely. They were very quick to burrow, and lurkers are super strong. I was concerned about the lurker buff when they kind of reduced the effectiveness of brute lurks and gave lurkers a buff. I thought that lurkers could kind of like take on the same role where they become kind of like the new extremely annoying unit to deal with for other races. It wasn't as drastic as brute lurks were, say, in Heart of the Swarm, but they definitely needed a little bit of tweaking. They were definitely a little bit overtuned, and I think this is, yeah, definitely a good change.
Yep, I'm pretty happy with this one as well. Again, it kind of feels like it addressed an absurdity. It wasn't necessarily the most imbalanced thing, although I'm willing to concede that maybe it was, because you certainly saw Protosses trying their best to avoid ever dealing with lurkers. But it definitely looked absurd, no matter if it was fair or not, or if the Protoss even won the fight or not. It just kind of looked absurd when they speed burrowed. And now it looks a bit more in line with what I would expect for a lurker, for a siege unit. And we'll, continue, I guess, thinking about where the lurker is and how it's going to be in particularly the ZVP matchup. But I know that this is also something that's been bothering a lot of Terrans. So again, it just felt like
I think the lurker is one of the ultimate units. In CVP, I actually see it the least because of capital ships being so popular. Yep. Disruptors being pretty good as well. If it was just ground armies, though, you would definitely see just Lurker Viper every game in CVP. But because capital ships have been so pervasive in the matchup, Lurkers kind of struggle to make it in CVP. But if we see a ground-based meta kind of solidify itself, then Lurkers are the king, or would have been the king. And they are kind of the king of, I think, late game CVT and CVZ.
Yeah, definitely agree there. I think it can kind of be summed up with like the ZVP matchup avoids lurkers, so we don't see them. But the ZVT lurker demands, ZVT meta demands lurkers, so we do see them when we get to see like, oh, okay, that's a bit silly.
Yeah.
So I like the change. And last and pretty much least, actually, is Nidus Worm. So this was also, I think, a sign, as you had said with the Queen thing, that this was just pros discussing. Because I don't think that regular Joe Schmoes at Blizzard would have actually picked up on this. But basically, Lambo pointed out that if the Queen can't transfuse off of creep, then the Nidus Worm gets severely nerfed as well. Because then it means that the Queen pops out, and then she has to wait couple seconds before she can transfuse the Nidus Worm. And the Nidus Worm, as far as my opinion, and I think most of the community's opinion, is not an overpowered strategy. It has its place. It's a surprise, so it can be effective. It maybe has more experimental use in the late game as far as like transportation. That's cool. But I don't think the Nidus Worm actually needed to be nerfed. So this was counteracting the Queen nerf, actually. That's the only reason this exists.
Yeah, and it's not a big deal. Like, creep recedes pretty fast as well these days, whereas in previous times, creep would have taken a while to recede, and then maybe there would have been something to talk about there where it can be used to, I don't know, block bases or something for longer. But as it stands, I think, yeah, it's just for the queens, so it makes sense.
Yep. And that is all of the balance patch notes, guys. Just again, to sum up for me, I looked at this and I said, this is most of what the community has been complaining about. Pros and just regular people on the ladder. So it's a light touch, and I'm totally understanding as to why it's a light touch. But I know, like, your perspective, for instance, is also quite common and very understandable, which is like, we kind of wish that there was something more. We wish that there was a big push that people really had to spend a lot of time changing things up.
Yeah, there's hopefully maps coming. I guess I am not super impressed by the balance patch, but yeah, it's better than not having a balance patch at all, from my perspective. So that's good, and I'm very excited for the maps, and I hope that there can be a little bit more kind of just variety introduced with the maps. This was again like one of the map contests where, in the TLMC that is, where a lot of the weirder, like cooler in my opinion, maps got voted to the top. I think there was from the freestyle category 3 in the top 5. So I really hope that ESL looks at that and they implement a couple of those as opposed to being safe, just implementing the one weird map that everyone will veto every time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think we've reached that point officially, and funnily enough, it was the balance patch reinvigorating the community that kind of made me believe even harder in the power of maps and making them kind of the more reliable approach to changing the game. Because the patch is not going to happen very often, and it's probably not going to change very much, but maps absolutely can. So, and I think that you add in all these different new maps, and the community will get reinvigorated. They'll actually be excited to see something very different on a very different map.
Exactly, like that is the way to change the game strategically right now, because otherwise if we keep just pumping out the same map with a different, like a reskinned map, which is what most of our map pool is most of the time for most of the history of the game, then you can just kind of have a formula that you follow every game, and to me that's a huge turnoff.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm pretty much in agreement at this point. Years ago it would have been a little less so, but now I think it's just clear that people want something very different. They latched on to the slight differences the patch gave us like it was a lifeline. So gonna hopefully see more of that in the future. But now to close out the stream, we're just going to kind of briefly hype up the Caster's Civil War, which Norton Gaming was kind enough to even encourage us to do. So the Caster's Civil War is the I guess, spiritual follow-up to the War Chest Team League, which was an awesome initiative by basically the last initiative, really, from people at Blizzard for Starcraft. And they made sure that a lot of the money went to the players and the casters, and that was just basically the most fun experience possible. And it was super effective. I was not expecting much from this wtih when I first heard about it, but yeah, it blew me out of the water. So now we're getting another one with wtih, as we know,
especially
him being
because
the
it was
savior.
on YouTube too, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah, it had a very good turnover, especially considering it was on YouTube. It was like, yeah, did really well.
Yeah, because it was kind of one of those weird areas where it was a Blizzard thing, not an ESL thing. So it had to be on, anyways. But anyway, it was just great. So now we have it, and it's going to be run by wtih, and he's actually going to be participating this time as opposed to just being the behind the scenes, do it all kind of person. And a lot of the like graphics and hype has already been set up. There's a Kickstarter for it as well. You guys should definitely check out. It's very close to hitting its goal. The community support has been incredible. And we were kind of briefly, casually discussing this up to even 8 months ago at this point. DreamHack Summer was actually when it was kind of one of those like, hey, wouldn't that be cool if it happened again? And now it's come to fruition. So the draft and the free-for-all to determine the draft order is going to be this, or rather next Wednesday. So the 30th. So I'm very excited, wtih. I know we were kind of briefly discussing strategy and the players that have signed up, but what are your expectations for this version of the Team League?
Personal or just overall?
Overall.
I think that it's going to be awesome. I couldn't be more excited. I think that it's a great initiative. Like you said, it did fantastic last time around, so I expect the same thing will follow suit. And yeah, hopefully it's big in terms of viewership and in terms of support, which has already been shown to. There's a lot of interest, so that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Very excited.
People were really excited, and that's exactly the kind of it is the expectation, but then the amount of community support that happened as fast as it did, that's what really surprised us. So Starcraft community, once again, just being awesome. But that's going to be, I think the plan right now is for, as I said, draft day on the 30th, and then the actual matches are going to be in the weekends of April, basically. So the playoffs sometimes in late April sometime. So now I'll ask you about your personal expectations. Do you have any?
Player list is looking awesome. Oh yeah, no, I ain't got no people. You mean like to pick?
Do you have people that you really want to pick?
Yeah, I want Cyril and Maru and Raynor on my
God.
team. Yeah, and Dark if he signs up. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, most of the big ones have signed up, and my personal expectation this time, like last time, I was kind of like just chilling, and I was like, yeah, okay, I got last pick. Let's see what we can do with that. Let's give an opportunity to these guys that could. This time, I'm not gonna pick anyone that isn't just gonna win me this thing. I'm gonna win this season, and I'm gonna win this season.
Okay, there's the competitive spirit now lighted here. I am gonna go with mostly the same people, the same couple of dubs, and even if
Really?
innovation.
That's cool.
Yeah, even if innovation was here, I probably wouldn't have picked him. He was not the best on the team league. I'm actually eyeing Gumiho to potentially replace him.
He's amazing.
Because Gumio was really fun, but he also was... Innovation was fantastic in team leagues, okay? There was more than just one reason why I picked Innovation, and he just didn't end up really performing, but I'm not going to put my hopes in Gumiho to perform as well as he has in previous, like, GSTLs. But that's... As you can see, we're kind of excited, guys. We're really looking forward to the shenanigans that are going to occur. But we are going to have to wrap up this particular stream. So thank you all for watching. Again, big thank you to anyone who submitted replays and helping us out. Hope you enjoyed like the little mini talk show we had here. Again, Katowice recap, the newest patch being recapped, and our kind of feelings and opinions on how it's so far played out this last week, as well as the Caster Cup tease, which you guys can find out more information about on wtih's channel. And if you would like to contribute to the Kickstarter, that is also an option. But one last time, there is a giveaway happening, so exclamation point giveaway, and then type key for me to actually participate in the giveaway. And I guess we'll wrap it up by saying we look forward to casting more StarCraft and actually working with ESL. Maybe in the future we'll get some time to discuss our hopes and dreams of the future for StarCraft 2, but that'll have to be another stream. Cats, thank you so much for joining me. Hope you had a lot of fun.
I did. Thank you very much, as per usual, for hosting and carrying my ass through the broadcast. And yeah, we'll see you guys later, I guess.
Yeah. And the next thing coming up is going to be the Caster Civil War, but soon enough, ESL will be restarting DreamHack in, I believe, May and or June. So look forward to the start of the StarCraft 2 season later down the line. Thank you all for watching. Please follow the channel, support Norton Gaming, and we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.